Okay. So tonight we have our talk on domestic abuse and suicide. This is part of the Suicide Prevention Coalition monthly educational talk. And during this time, we'll be talking about intimate partner violence, its connection to suicide, some tools to offer support to those in this type of challenging situation. IPV can also have a traumatizing impact on those involved, and suicidal thoughts, depression, and anxiety can all be byproducts of this experience. So we are here to support you and make sure that we're providing those resources to you so that you can make sure you're staying safe. So thank you guys all for being here tonight. We have Lois Walter speaking tonight, and she is familiar with mental health and addictions as a nurse/counselor. She's also a college level educator with over 38 years of experience. She holds 2 master's degrees, one in nursing and one in human services. And she has completed Eastern Mennonite University's Parish Nurse Program, also known as Faith Community Nursing. And in 2005, Lois started a local faith-based widows support group, which continues to this day. She also teaches CPR and first aid in the community. And she also has helped us here at MHA, Mental Health America, with QPR trainings, and does so much in this coalition to help provide community-based resources for suicide prevention. So we really appreciate her speaking to us tonight on this topic. So I'm excited to get started. Lois, you can take it away.
I'm going to share my slides with you. Okay, can you see the slides okay? Can everybody
Yes,
see the slides?
I can.
Okay, great. And also, we just want to mention that we do have the chat available that you can put your questions in at any time. We're also going to put some crisis phone numbers in the chat as well. And if you would like a private, just keep your chat private, that's fine. Just send it to the host. And I'll stop periodically as well, answer any questions you have. So definitely feel free to do that. So we'll look at our objectives, and we want to take a little poll of who we have with us as well.
And actually, it looks like the poll was disabled. I'm going to have you go through this slide, and then I'll do the poll.
Okay, very good. So basically, we have 4 objectives that we're going to look at. Some adverse childhood experiences that might create a risk for intimate partner violence and suicide. We'll look at signs of intimate partner violence and suicide and interventions. We need more professional collaboration, so we're going to talk about that, and safety planning, and we'll have local and national resources available for you.
Okay, and actually, I see those of you who are here, and I'm familiar with them. So I know a fair amount of you are coming from the experience of the professional setting and being involved with this kind of work and how you can help support other people. We also know that some of you are here with personal experiences from the past and looking for like strategies for moving forward. And so we'll be addressing tonight's talk from both the perspective of those of you looking at it from a professional angle and looking to help other people, recognizing the signs and understanding that perspective, as well as if you're dealing with it personally and working through the recovery process. So,
okay. All right, so I'm going to step back a little bit and tell you a little bit about my story coming from a personal standpoint. This is my family. Myself is the brownie here. My mother was a Girl Scout leader, well known in the community, well liked, very social. This is my family after I got married at age 18. My husband, Ray, my oldest son, Don, Karen, and my youngest son, Brian. So going back to the picture of the brownie, as I said, my mother was a Girl Scout leader, well liked in the community. Looked good on the outside, but I have to tell you what people saw on the outside was not exactly what it was like on the inside in my family growing up. My father had frequent anger outbursts. when he had these outbursts, which were unpredictable. We never knew what was going to happen. Oftentimes, I would be the one that would be in the area, and my father would pick me up and throw me against the wall, or I never really knew what was going to happen. So we just kept those kind of things a secret. My mother tried her best to take care of us. My father was a door-to-door salesman, and at first he did really well. We lived in a nice neighborhood, a three-bedroom home in a nice community and outside of Newark, Delaware. My mother babysat a little bit, but over time, things gradually got worse. And by the time I was 11 years old, things had deteriorated, and my mother was working as much as she could. And at that point, there was a day where my father got very abusive, and I was crouched on the floor in a hallway, and he was kicking me excessively. And my mother intervened to protect me. And I don't know what she said or what she did, but it never happened again. But at that point in time, my relationship with my father really drifted off, because prior to that, I used to sit on his lap. He would sing to me, and we had a little bit of a relationship, although most of that time I never knew when those anger outbursts would occur. And when the anger outbursts would occur, he would also shake his fist and talk to people that weren't there. So it's obviously some psychotic issues going on. About the time I got to 7th grade, I came home from school, and there was a sign on the door, sheriff's sale. And I didn't know what that was. I asked my mom, and she said, we have to move, and we have to move fast. She found a place. I don't even remember if I got to say goodbye to my friends. Next thing I know, we were in the country, we were in the state of Pennsylvania now. New school, new surroundings, old farmhouse, one heating source in the living room, outside bathroom. The bathtub was outside as well, or in a separate room. And so it's in a whole different world. I had my group of friends. I'd been there since 1st grade, and wasn't real popular, but I was comfortable. I pretty much lived at my one friend's house because they seemed to have a normal home. And so when I moved, it was really traumatic for me, because I just didn't know how to make friends. I didn't really know how to operate in this new world. And kids just don't come up to you and say, I want to be your friend. So I kind of analyzed the situation the best I could. I tried to be a people pleaser, tried to make friends the best I could. And at that age in middle school, friends were very important to me. I wanted to be liked. And so it was real difficult. It was challenging, because I obviously had hygiene problems, because I could only wash in a kitchen sink. And the gym teacher at one point created a lot of humiliation with me, because she sent me to a shower to get showered before the gym class would start. She had another student stay with me, and I felt very humiliated. And then also we had, it was basketball season, and I was very short. I was somewhat teased for that shortness. And they were picking teams, and nobody wanted me on their team. And it got to the point where the gym teacher says, well, somebody has to just take her. So I felt very rejected, very shame-based. And I can remember sitting in a classroom and thinking about suicide, just thinking I just wanted to disappear. But I just knew I couldn't kill myself, but I really thought I wanted a way out. And I reanalyzed the situation, and I noticed that all of the girls who were popular were both pretty and thin. And I thought if I could just lose weight, maybe that was a way I could make friends. And my mom at the time, I had told her about, I need clothes and you want to fit in. And she had got a very good job. My father could not work at all at this point. And one of her friends kept donating nice clothing, and they were very nice clothes. So I was getting the very nice clothes, and I didn't care how cold it was. I was making myself look good. And so I started saving my lunch money and not eating, so that I could get things like a transistor radio, so I could listen to music, things like that. And the benefits of not eating, was something I could control. And I started making a few friends. So I survived middle school. By the time I got to high school, things got a lot better. I did make some friends. I still didn't have a lot of self-worth. I was shy and I didn't have a lot of confidence, but I was able to do well in school. My brothers were good students as well. In our family, we had some, I would call them unwritten rules. We knew that we were loved. It was never shared that we were loved, but we knew we were loved. But was also stressed that you don't tell anyone what's going on in this house. We need to keep secrets. It was also shared that you don't express your emotions unless they're good ones. You're not allowed to share bad anger or any other types of emotions. Ironically, with my dad not working, there was a strong work ethic. Academics were very encouraged. Both of my parents were college educated. And so that I kept up with the rules that we had in our home. One particular summer, a neighbor, and we were far apart. I could just barely see a neighbor in the distance, but we got to be somewhat friends, and she invited me to Bible school at a small country church. And I found that these people really cared about me and accepted me. And so I started attending a youth group there at that church and felt a real love for these people, and what they were telling me, that Jesus loved me, and that God wasn't what I thought. It was like my dad, that there was a loving God, a loving Father, and he was just and fair, but he was loving. And so I became a Christian. I gave my heart and soul to Jesus, and I started attending and feeling connected. I felt a sense of connectedness. I graduated with no problems. I signed up for nursing school, which is really ironic because I worked for the same school that I was signed up for. However, my future sister-in-law was in my youth group, and she told me about her brother who was in the Army in New Jersey, and said that he wanted to write letters to me. He remembered me from the school bus, and we used to joke around a little bit, and I remembered him, and I said, sure, I'll write letters to him. So he was lonely, she said. Sure, I'll write letters. So we started writing letters, and he said, when I come home, when I can get home on the weekends, can we go out and go bowling? He liked to bowl. I said, sure, let's go. So we did that. That was in November of 1970, and that Christmas, he proposed marriage to me after 6 weeks. And it was very charming, very funny. I didn't want to be with anyone that was angry like my dad, so I made sure he was easygoing, which he was. But I wasn't ready to get married. I said, I'm signed up for nursing school. This is fun. Let's just keep seeing each other this way. So that was fine until February, when he got orders to go to Georgia, to be transferred to Georgia in an Army base. And we continued to write letters, and I got a letter from him saying that if I didn't marry him, he was going to kill himself. And I didn't really know what to say to that, but I didn't want to be responsible for that either. Anyway, I decided to get married. So we got married in July, and I went down to the Army base. I'd never been away from home. About a week after we were married, he was coming home intoxicated and very angry. I never saw intoxicated before. This was something new, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to call my mother, because my mother had said my dad had emotional problems, but she could never have lived with him if he was drinking. And I never forgot her saying that. So I felt like I couldn't tell her what was going on. But there was these episodes of anger, blaming, a lot of jealousy. Every time I saw a man, he thought I was betraying him. A lot of criticizing, belittling, controlling, possessiveness, continually putting me down. And so at one point, he was asked to leave the Army because he got intoxicated, and there was a situation where there was some fights, and he was asked to leave the military. So we moved back to Pennsylvania. He got a job in a foundry, but the drinking and the anger episodes continued over and over again. And it started this cycle that I couldn't get off that merry-go-round. First child came along, second child came along. I was working as a waitress. It was in a small town, so I could walk there. We only had one vehicle, and I could make a little bit of money. I had applied for Lancaster, a practical nursing school. And so I was hoping, my dream was to become a nurse. Right after high school, I was hired at a nursing home, and I was working as a nurse's aide. I loved my job, and that was my job just before I got married. And my dream was to become a nurse. But after my second child, I became very depressed. And with the whole situation that was going on, and there was a day when I looked at the telephone bill, and there was a lot of charges to Maryland. And when my husband came in and he was intoxicated, I told him about the bills, and he said he was having an affair. And I didn't know how to handle that. I did not handle it well. I knew that he was taking back pain or back muscle relaxants for a back injury, and I decided to take some of the pills, but not all the pills, and put the pills, set the empty bottle next to the bedside so he could see that I was desperate, and I was desperate, and see if he would make changes. And it was just some disorganized thinking in my part. But I did that. I don't know how many pills I took, 6 or 7. I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't want to be in the same situation. I thought if I died, it was okay, but I love my kids, and I just felt trapped in a situation. So in the morning, I was unresponsive. He tried to wake me up. He couldn't get me awake. He contacted his uncle, which they lived right next door. And the uncle came over, apparently called the physician. The physician said, give her coffee. So they gave me coffee after coffee after coffee. And by evening, I was fine. And that was the end of it. But he said that I couldn't go to nursing school now because they don't take people who try to kill themselves. But lo and behold, I did. My mother tried to help me financially. My father had passed away, and she was able to save a little bit of money, and I was able to go to LPN school, which I did, graduated, got hired in a hospital, loved my job. And one of my people that I worked with worked in a substance abuse program, and she had somehow I just felt safe with her. I never even told my mom even after a DUI that my late husband had, but I felt safe with her. She took me to an Al-Anon meeting. I found that it was not my fault, and what was going on was not healthy. I was not taking care of myself. I started making some changes. I stopped some of the enabling behaviors. I stopped cleaning up the vomit, cleaning up the cat litter every night. He was a bar drinker. He never drank at home. He didn't want to drink in front of the kids. He obviously did love our children very much, but he'd wait until they were in bed and then he'd take off. But the kids were hearing all the anger, the screaming in their beds. My daughter said one night she got into the closet and she was so scared, which makes me feel bad to this day. But we definitely went round and round. One time, I had the car keys in my pocket because I was trying to keep him from going out and drinking, and he started to choke me, and somehow I got the car keys out and gave them to him. There was some pushing and shoving, but mostly it was more verbal abuse. But after I started going to Al-Anon, I kept it a secret for a while, and then I was able to stand up and say, I am taking care of myself. I'm getting help. At the same time, we were in a lawsuit because he had another DUI, and he ran through a red light and hit a vehicle, and the person was almost killed. They were in a coma. They came out of the coma, but there was some medical issues, and so there was a lawsuit going on. He said that he wasn't going to deal with it. He was going to another state. And I said, fine, go ahead and you can go. I can take care of myself now. I don't need you here anymore. Lo and behold, he didn't go. He said he told me about an AA meeting. I think I'm going to go. He went to an AA meeting, and right after the meeting, they picked him up and took him to rehab. Things changed, got better for a little while, but he relapsed. and things went right back to the way they were. In fact, he was really getting the verbal abuse was increasing so much that I took the children to a domestic abuse shelter temporarily until I could find a place for myself. And my mother allowed me to come to her home after about 3 days. So I was at my mom's with the kids, looking for an apartment for myself and the children. And my husband had called my mom and told her how sorry he was, which I had heard over and over and over, how sorry he was, never do it again. And she believed him and worked it out with him that she would hand me the phone. I said, I can't talk to him because if I hear his voice, I'm going to go, I'm going to go right back. But she handed me the phone, and he's told me that he had a knife in his hand, it was in his stomach, and if I didn't come home, he was going to kill himself. I went home. So I went home with the kids, but I said, I'm not living this way anymore. And I continued to make changes. I got into therapy, and he went back into rehab for a second time. And this time around, he really seemed more serious, and things started to change. The pattern was changing as well. And I just started standing up for myself, taking care of myself. And I said, I'm no longer a victim, I'm a survivor. And I made changes. And I said, I don't have to be here unless I want to be here. And so he got into therapy. My children got into therapy. We were like the therapy family, couples therapy, children's therapy, individual therapy. And so things did get better. We were married 32 years. 15 of those were the difficult years. The last 15 years weren't perfect, but they certainly were better. The verbal abuse was rare. There were some episodes of yelling, but very, very much different than it had been with help with therapy. So you see the picture up on the left side was the first 15 years, and that second picture at the bottom is us as a family. My husband started attending church with us, and not that we were the perfect family by any means, but we certainly were much better. And the reason I have vulnerabilities here is that I could see from my childhood, that low self-esteem, the poor self-image, negative self-talk, low confidence, poor, just not being able to be assertive, those kind of things that I needed to make some serious changes on. And I was really looking to get out of the house. And the first person that told me they loved me was, and that was charming and nice to me, I was willing to marry. So, but that's my story. Unfortunately, my late husband died in 2004 from lung cancer. He stopped drinking, but he never stopped smoking. And God has a sense of humor, I believe, because 3 years after that, I remarried, and interesting enough, a retired police officer. He was a police officer in Lancaster City. And I said, my late husband had 3 DUIs, and I wanted to know if he arrested him. So like I said, God has a sense of humor, but this is where a little bit about me and my story. So I thought I would talk about, on the professional side, adverse childhood experiences. We can also look at those related to trauma as well, but I wanted to kind of look at these in perspective of intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, and suicide. And so you may be familiar with this study in 1994 that the CDC and the Kaiser Permanente put together, and they took a look at the relationship between these children that had adverse childhood experiences and what that carried on into adulthood, into areas that would cause problems physically or psychologically, emotionally, and also into social areas as well. And so we can look at those findings, and you can see a correlation between increased risk for depression and suicide attempts. So take a little bit closer look at that. As you can see here, these are categories of adverse childhood experiences, and I highlighted in yellow things that I could relate to growing up with a family member with mental illness, being physically abused, emotionally abused, and some of the other ones on here I could probably check off as well. This is under age 18. Someone growing up in a family with alcohol use disorder may have some similar experiences. Also, somebody that has a parent that's incarcerated, domestic violence, of course, and also a death of a parent or divorce. So the more of these that an individual has, the greater potential for problems in their adulthood, especially if there's 4 or more. And it's interesting and sad, really, that the effects can really start even with the preborn and young children. And if you think of a child, either if they're witnessing their parent being abused, the effects of that, or if they themselves are being abused, how that creates hyperactivity or hypervigilance rather, and fear and anxiety. Their heart rates are higher. There's definitely adrenaline going all the time. That this is not normal for kids, and having difficulty sleeping. The yellow is what I relate to: anxiety, depression, and sleep issues, and getting into risky relationships. Some people self-medicate with food or smoking, alcohol use. Diseases such as cancer and asthma and heart disease are more prominent with people with adverse childhood events, as well as serious social issues. So when we're looking at elements of domestic abuse, the abuser is generally male, but we want to point out it's not always male. This can also be female, a perpetrator or abuser. Also, the most vulnerable are the pregnant women and children, and especially a child with disability, because a child with a disability, autism or on the spectrum, or ADHD or any other disorder like that, they demand more time. They're less emotionally regulated, so they may themselves have anger outbursts, which may set off the abuser. Also, elderly or increased in vulnerability. And then if there's a crisis going on, financial crisis in the family, even a new baby, a new job, all kinds of things that can set the tension whenever there's an increased tension in the home. As I shared a little bit earlier about intimate partner violence exposure upon children, and their ability to even concentrate in school, their behavior in school, their social skills can be affected. And you'll see their self-esteem. Bullying can be either side of the fence. They can be bullied, or they can become the bulliers. You can see this can play out in a lot of areas where they're delayed physically, emotionally, and have a lot of sleep problems, nightmares, and different problems with anxiety and depression. So again, the statistics show that it's more predominant in women for intimate partner violence, but also interesting and sad to know that so many people that are injured from an intimate partner violent situation physically don't seek medical help. And another thing that stands out to me is when there's a weapon in the home. And I know in my situation, my late husband was a hunter, and we had a gun in the home, a rifle, and it was not locked. I'm ashamed to say, because now I'm a big advocate for gun locks. And there was a couple times where he went out when he was drunk, and he would shoot the gun in the air. I remember one time I had my son was a little over a year old, my oldest, and we really just laid on the ground in the house on the floor, because the gunshots were so close, and I called the police because I thought we were going to be killed. So guns, weapons, and of course alcohol use and domestic violence, there's such an increase in homicide and also murder suicides. And the reason I'm wearing purple, as you can see a little bit of, is for these victims with domestic violence, or those people suffering with domestic violence, but also purple is also the color for suicide prevention. So I'm purple tonight. Also in yellow, it's highlighted domestic victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicide behaviors. And you can see this where the reference came from. The cycle of battering, I always thought it was like a dance. We just kept doing the same dance over and over. And my role in this, or the victim's role in this, is to keep the tension down. You keep the kids quiet. You do everything you possibly can. You walk on eggshells because you don't want to set off the abuse. And so this is typical in these cycles where you try to keep the attention, but something always happens. Something always happens that's a triggering event and creates that anger outburst and the battering. So then the battering occurs. And then after the battering occurs is the honeymoon phase. And this is where I'm sorry, I'll never do this again. The rationalizations, this was a bad day, etc. It's your fault, accepting blame. But I really, this honeymoon phase, to this day, I do not like red roses. And my dear loving husband now knows he cannot bring me red roses because I got so many red roses or red that during this honeymoon phase that I don't like red roses. Any other color is fine, but no red roses. One time it was Valentine's, just thinking of Valentine's Day coming up on Monday. There was a Valentine's Day where I was at work and I thought I forgot to lock my car, and there was a card on the seat, and it said, "To my secret admirer." And I'm like, oh, it's so nice. And I thought, this is a honeymoon phase, he's really coming around, things are getting better. So I got home and it had inside, it said, "I love you, your secret admirer." And I came home and I said, "Thank you so much for the card and the secret admirer card." And he said, "That wasn't me." Was very jealous, and I was all the time jealous. I couldn't even look at anybody. And I'm like, "What had to have been you?" And he said, "No, it wasn't me." And so he got really angry and abusive about it. And it turned out after he got sober, he said, "The time that I was me that planted that card in your car." It was emotional blackmail. I'm not sure even why he did that, but I would get stuck in this emotional phase. And this is what happens. This is why you keep going through the cycle, because you believe it's going to be different next time, but it never is. So this just explains what an intimate partner violence is, and the cycle of battering, this pattern of coercive behavior to gain power and control, because that's really what it is. And it manifests in many, many ways. But that victim generally is in a state of fear, a lot of low self-esteem, accepting blame, isolated from supports. I know when we were in Georgia, and even when we moved back to Pennsylvania, I didn't have supports. My husband didn't want me to even call my mom. And this learned helplessness is pretty common, where unfortunately you just feel like, what's the use? Why bother? It's always going to be this way. I don't have the money. I can't get out on my own. I'm just going to have to do the best I can. This is the power and control wheel. I mentioned a little bit when I was in the domestic abuse shelter, they showed me this. I never saw this before. But also the other side, I think, is equally important, to understand equality and what actually is normal. I didn't know what normal was. I had no idea what mutual respect was, partnership was, negotiation. Every time he would become angry, we tried to have a discussion. He got angry and into his car and out into the community and drinking. So I never was able to get through a conflict, but this is what it is. And to have feeling safe with somebody and be able to share anything on your heart or mind, to be able totally honest and to trust, this was foreign to me. Although I have it now, and I'm very thankful I do, that mutual respect. But on the other side, this physical or emotional violence, the isolation, emotional abuse, intimidation, coercion, economic abuse, male privilege, using the kids, if you leave, I'm going to kill you, those kind of things. Really, is debilitating for the victim, and it keeps them in that under the control and power of the abuser. We do have handouts of anything that you see here. There's handouts. In fact, I have handouts of not only the English version of the power and control and equity, but I also have the Spanish for both of these and the teen version for both of these, because teenagers, it's just a slightly different. Definitely having our community has many people who may be Hispanic, so if anybody is interested, we have those available. And sometimes forced sex is part of intimate partner violence, and understanding what is actually rape. It is an act of aggression, not passion. I really like this video down here. If anybody wants this video or the PowerPoint with this video, it is an excellent, excellent video. It's done in kind of a cartoon way, but it talks about consent in a way that people can really, really get it and understand what it is. So you wonder why people stay. And I mentioned the honeymoon phase. You keep thinking things will change and go back to the good times the way they used to be. And there were good times. I will say that with my family, we were able to buy a little camper and go camping. And during the camping times, it was great. We didn't, there was very little outbursts. There was no drinking. We had a great time, but then somewhere along the line, the pattern started to go back. So sometimes people feel trapped in their situation. They fear losing their kids. They don't have the support. Sometimes their culture has something, influences them staying, or maybe their religion, religious influences, financial dependence, if you don't have the money, and then fear of retaliation. If you leave, I'm going to kill you and the kids, and sometimes the victim does not even realize the situation as dangerous as it is. And this is where we talk about interventions, helping someone recognize the danger that there is present or could be present is so important, without telling them they have to do what we want them to do. So as part of those interventions, the first thing is really just being attentive and listening to their story. Like, you listened to my story tonight, and that was just a small piece of it. And then really assessing that danger, if they're in danger. And you have to do that by asking questions, but yet being empathetic and not sympathetic, like, oh, I know somebody that's been through this, or you should do this, you should do that, but really, really gaining their trust and showing empathy. I can't imagine, this is a really tough time for you. Know that I'm here for you. That accepting attitude, not judgmental. Why would somebody stay in a situation like this? But to really be empathetic. And this takes time in building a relationship. Or if you're an evaluator in a professional setting, you may need to really hone in on what's going on quickly. But allowing that client to identify and express their feelings. Now, I didn't even know what I was feeling, especially as a youth. I didn't know what I was feeling, and I wasn't permitted really, or in my family, to express it. So it may be difficult, but allowing somebody to cry, to just share where they're at, to express themselves any way they possibly can, and to also look at and identify their protective factors. What are some of the strengths? What are some of the positive things? And pointing those out, that they might not be able to be aware of some of the positive things in their support system, and building a support system. What are their coping strategies, and what are some of the pathological ones that maybe they're self-medicating with drugs, alcohol, food, or other substance or other areas that they might need intervention for as well for that. And then referring them. Safety plan. I have a copy of a safety plan that I'm going to pull up in a few minutes. We'll stop and pause for a little bit, but I want to show you the safety plan in a minute. I think I have one more slide or two, because safety planning and thinking ahead is preventatory. It helps that person that's going through intimate partner violence really know where the help is and what they can do. Knowing where the shelters are, where there's counseling, where support groups are. I mentioned MHA here because of the various support groups. There may be a lot of anxiety, depression, or other issues that MHA could be a great resource to help someone in their navigating to recovery. And then religious and spiritual resources. I know for me, my church family was exceedingly important. They are still very important. They accept me as I am. And so pastors or whoever in the spiritual area that can be helpful. So again, here's some quick ways to think about intimate partner violence screenings. And this is something I teach my students at Pennsylvania College of Health Sciences as a nursing instructor. We only had an hour and a half. I think it was an hour and a half. I think one semester I had 2 hours on trauma, intimate partner violence, domestic violence. That's all we had. So what little time I had, I tried to make use of. And this was a couple acronyms that I thought was helpful. And knowing these students are, most of them aren't going to work in mental health, but I really try to stress with my students that the importance of being able to identify clients that are going through domestic violence situations by routinely screening them, and doing this we're seeing it more in physician offices, emergency rooms, and also that goes as well for suicide prevention, which we're going to talk in a moment about suicide prevention. Asking direct questions, and this is something the students would struggle with so much, but learning and practicing how to just directly ask. And over here you see the HITS acronym, HITS. Are you hurt? Have you been kicked, slapped, punched, kicked, etc. physically? I for insulted or intimidated, threatened in any way? And are you being screamed at or sweared at? So these are ways we can actually ask direct questions. If it's a professional setting, to document these in quotes rather than your opinion, and assess for that patient's safety and assist them with a safety plan, and then review options for referrals. There's also this radar acronym is actually a 2-page document. So if anybody's interested in seeing that, we have those available. And then I also included these family resource cards that are in bathrooms. Bathroom is a safe place for women to go into. And the purple cards that are in there are there for people that are looking for help that may be in an intimate partner violence situation. And so it asks questions. This is directly from a card. I just copied, instead of copying the card, I just wrote the questions down. So these questions are what somebody would read if they picked up one of the cards in the bathroom. Are you afraid of your partner? Do you walk on eggshells, etc.? Does your partner say things that make you feel bad? So these are questions that somebody would actually read and recognize, yes, my partner has threatened to hurt me or hurt my loved ones. Then on the back, they have the safety acronym, and I love acronyms, to stash some money away, to have some clothes for you and your kids, hide this in a bag somewhere, get your financial records, your birth certificates, whatever, an escape plan, where can you go, have some telephone numbers that you know where to call for help, or memorize them. As you can see here, 1-800-799-SAFE is pretty easy to remember. So maybe you got to hide everything else, you can remember that number and know that they deserve to be safe. So again, we're going to finish up shortly with these slides, and then we're going to stop and look at that safety plan and see if you have any questions. So with intimate partner violence, again, empathy. People feel trapped in that situation. They may feel that the abuse is their fault, not unusual. So being empathetic, saying messages such as "you're safe here," "no one deserves to be hit or kicked or yelled at," knowing this safe house numbers in your area and memorizing those hotlines, or having the client try to memorize those hotlines. And then using a trauma-informed care approach. This is something we really stress with our students. And right now I'm at Lancaster Behavioral Health Hospital with students 2 days a week. And we talk a lot about trauma-informed care because a lot of these students are going to become nurses very shortly, and they are going to be caring for people in a medical setting, and to not re-traumatize them, even if it's an EKG that they're thinking about disrobing someone, and how to be respectful of that. So trauma-informed care is very, very important. And so with intimate partner violence, we can interject some of those principles. So this is a slide on, we're going to start talking about suicide prevention, and then we're going to link everything together. So I'm just going to go out and show you the slide I have on safety planning. And let me see if I can make this bigger, because it probably doesn't show up that big. Can you see it? Is it really small?
You can click where it says 100% right in the middle of the top of the PDF and just
Right there?
yeah,
Right
just
there?
make it a plus and
Oh,
like
thank you.
You're welcome.
Does that look okay?
Yeah.
Can you see it? So I'm just going to go through it quickly. If you're familiar with safety planning, but recognition of what's going on, you can see on the right side, phone numbers people can call, things they can do that they enjoy. This is geared to a college student, but it could be adapted for pretty much any age group. Could be high school, college. You could be adapted for an adult as well. Loveisrespect.org, and this is their number, is geared to youth, young people, high school students, and it's really talks their language. It's very helpful. It also has an area for the LGBTQ community, as well, as they're at high risk for suicide. And as you can see here, they can have phone numbers in here to help them if they need help. Also, best way to get to class. They're afraid they might run into the abuser, what they can do. If they
Hey,
feel,
Lois,
yes,
could I interject real quick?
go ahead.
So I know you have a bunch of resources in here, just so everybody knows, those resources are going to go into, I have a sheet that I can send out that's like all the different resources that she's mentioning. And there'll also be the final slides in her PowerPoint, but I've turned them into just a simple PDF. So if you're vigorously like trying to make sure you get all the numbers and those kind of things, just so you know, they will be available. So you don't have to do that.
Thank you. That was perfect timing.
Yeah.
And then down here, it says it's checks off thing. I will carry my cell phone with me, things they can do. And again, you can see this later, but I love the safety planning. I think we use it a lot. We use it all the time in mental health with our clients that have suicide thinking, and what they can do with their warning signs, their coping strategies, and hotlines and numbers they can call, and what they can do. And this is the equivalent to that in the area of intimate partner violence. So I really think it's important to kind of be aware that there are safety plans out there for intimate partner violence. So let me go back here. So these are some, when just gently talk a little bit about suicide risk factors, and include the areas that intimate partner violence may be also identified. Any of these could be risk factors for people, but the intimate partner violence, especially with having the weapon in the home, social isolation, depression that may be undiagnosed. And of course, all these are important risk factors to know. Being single, the occupations, past trauma, past history of suicide, substance use. So they're all important risk factors that help us to understand a little bit more about people who could be at risk for suicide, as well as warning signs for suicide. And as you can see, the yellow highlights are observed in intimate partner violence, but that doesn't mean some of these other things couldn't be as well. But definitely people who are having thoughts of suicide or in significant psychic pain. Somebody with intimate partner violence may, in that situation, may feel trapped, worthless, hopeless, having difficulty connecting to others, being isolated, untreated depression, deficient coping strategies for sure, They may have expressed a wish to die, like I said, some of the other things. Current emotional crisis. I live from crisis to crisis, I think, and a lack of support system. So these are all warning signs of suicide, but the yellow incorporates the connection between that and intimate partner violence. And then when we're in interventions for suicide, again, we'll want to mention our QPR with MHA if anybody's interested in learning more about suicide prevention, where we have the question, persuade, and refer. Here, we're just simply saying about being direct and asking directly if someone is having suicidal thoughts. Are you having thoughts of ending your life? You're thinking about killing yourself? Do you have a plan? Referring them and knowing where to refer them to. Again, MHA may be helpful in getting somebody to the right therapist. CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is for somebody that is going through suicide thinking, or even intimate partner violence. I know I had a lot of thoughts that I would say were, my cognitive dissonance with those, that I wasn't thinking clearly, and I needed to reframe a lot of the negative thinking that I had. But family parenting classes, family therapy, support groups, assertiveness training, all can be helpful. Motivational interviewing, evidence-based practice. This is something we're teaching our students as well, which I'm really excited about, because you got to meet people where they are, and if where they're willing to start, and what you can work with them, and see them grow and see them make positive changes as they're ready to, building that trust and support. And then again, safety planning over and over and over. We can't emphasize enough knowing that crisis intervention number and hotline specific for suicide prevention, locally and nationally. And here's a comparison to compare and contrast the relationship between intimate partner violence and suicide. And as you can look at, these are statistics, and you can see intimate partner violence and the probability of suicide, and people who have a history of mental health disorders. We see that the substance abuse here used as well, the influence of alcohol and drugs in both died by suicide and intimate partner violence, and firearms, and what the influence of having firearms and the potential for murder suicides or suicide. So there's a lot of connections that we can see. And one of the things that I wanted to finish up with shortly is that we really need greater collaboration between professions. And I worked in several areas. I worked in the medical area. I worked in outpatient mental health. I worked in inpatient psychiatric hospitals. I've worked in a substance abuse program, and all of them kind of were siloed, and it's hard to get information between agencies. And an individual may have diabetes, and at the same time they may be in intimate partner violence. They may also have suicidal thinking. And how can we bridge this and work together? So one way we're seeing is definitely screening. Increasing screening is being done. As I said, family practice, emergency rooms are asking both intimate partner violence questions and suicide questions about possible suicidal thinking. And also, so we are seeing some improvement, but I know right now, as I have students at Langs Behavioral Health, most of the patients there are not there because of schizophrenia. Although we do have some that are psychotic, quite a few with bipolar, but the majority of the people, and I've been on all 6 units in the past 2 weeks, are there because of suicidal thinking, and they're in crisis and they don't know how to handle it. And so we need to get to know our clients and get to know them in a way. If are they having substance use disorders as well, that they can get additional help, or intimate partner violence in addition to the suicidal thinking. So this is a question that we'll have at the end. If you have thoughts of like, how can we collaborate to better meet the needs of our clients out there? So strategies to reduce suicide, we've mentioned safety planning numerous times, but we can't overemphasize that. Referring to therapy, again, cognitive behavioral therapy, identifying and managing suicidal thoughts and negative thinking, reducing lethal means such as firearms, gun locks, and the gun shop project, the Suicide Prevention Coalition has been involved in locally on Willow Street. And we actually have been passing out gun locks. It's so important.
And we
And
still have a bunch here at the office too, available.
yes, we need to get them out.
Yeah.
And public health approach. So we're looking at things as outlined by the CDC, locally, state, tribal, in every aspect possible to reach the people we can. So we have some local numbers here. As I said, this will be made available. Our coalition website, Mental Health America's website and phone numbers, Lancaster Crisis Intervention, Lancaster Domestic Violence Services, Safe Houses, 24 hours a day. We have a phone number there. Lancaster Behavioral Health Hospital will do psychiatric evaluations, but they do ask you call ahead, and if this is a physician officer, whoever is referring, that they call ahead and give a referral. And then Lancaster hotline for the PA contact and the teen line. And then we also have 211, which will have all kinds of social services, and people with intimate partner violence or even suicide prevention, but particularly intimate partner violence, may need help in all areas. They may need clothing banks, they may need food banks, they may need legal services. The list from 211 for social services is can be very helpful for somebody going through intimate partner violence, and maybe they're on their own. And then we also have, in addition to 211, Pennsylvania and national, we have the Suicide Prevention Resource Center hotlines. Again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, QPR, which I mentioned. There's an overview. You can contact MHA for a training. Loveisrespect.org. This really is geared for young people. It does also include LGBTQ community. And these apps, people are into apps. If nothing else, I want you to know about these apps. There's 3 apps out there, and I'm sure there's more apps, but these are amazing. I was on the websites, or I was able to see what these are like. There's a text safety app. All these have to do with safety. This one, R3 app, you recognize, respond, and refer. And then this Aspire News app is supposed to help in a potentially, it's a life-saving app. If you're in an emergency, at a touch of a button, you can get help in an intimate partner violence situation. So very, very interesting that we now have apps for everything. So at this point, we're going to stop and see if you have questions, and then we have some discussion questions for you.
And also, if you do have questions, but you don't want to unmute yourself, you can write them in the chat, or you can write them in the chat, but also send it just directly to me. So the way that you would do that in the chat is where it says to, and then it's a blue bar that says everyone. Instead, you would hit the drop down menu and just hit to, I guess it would be MHA. I can't see my own title, but but it should say also the host in parentheses, actually.
Mhm.
So if you do have any questions, or feel free to unmute yourself.
I like Kim's suggestion, putting suicide prevention cards in bathrooms too. It's a safe place. It's a safe place. Yeah.
Yeah, we also do have those manuals for 211. So it's like a whole big packet of all the numbers and everything, in case you're not wanting to research online and see them there, or call the phone number, maybe more discreet to have the pamphlet. So whatever works best for your situation and for those that are in need.
Great. That's great.
Lois, I wanted to thank you for bringing up teen, like even having the handout for teenagers. I work with teenagers, and I talk about I work with PCAVD. Why do I always mess that up? And so, and I'm about to do stuff with teens because it's Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And of course, I work with teens when it comes to suicide prevention or education, really, anyway, as well. So it's kind of, this has been really helpful for me to be able to see the difference or to see the connection between the two. Having experienced it, it's one thing. I was a grown woman, but really there's in a way, it's no different. And I was also a teen and wanted to get out of my house really quickly as well, Lois. So I know how we fall into that. So it's one thing to be able to bring personal experience, but what you just gave me was what you just did, which was brilliant, which you gave me all these resources. And I wanted to thank you because I'm going to pass them on to teenagers in Pennsylvania in the next 3 weeks. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. It's great. Well, the discussion questions about, is there anything that surprised you, challenged you, signs of intimate partner violence or risks that you learned, or how can we help someone struggling? What did you take away? And do you know of any other resources? Because we can always learn from each other more resources, or if another way we can work on that collaboration professionally. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I think I know tonight is kind of the start to a lot of this, where I would love to learn more about how we can do more to collaborate or connect between different resources for people and make sure there's that continuity of care. I would also love to learn more about just how to help people in that situation. I think, kind of like a QPR training only for helping somebody out of a domestic violence situation. And helping them to actually take those steps when they are fearing for their lives, and
Yeah.
even if they do want to get out, but they're so scared, to do so. So yeah, it's a big topic. There's so much more I'm sure we could talk about too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's unique to have the connection, to actually see the connection between intimate partner violence or domestic abuse and suicide, that don't usually hear them at the same time. It's usually they're over, this topic and this topic. But I want to thank Kay, because she thought this through to say, look, we need to take a look at this, and with our Suicide Prevention Coalition, and look at these areas that actually influence people's mental health and thoughts of suicide. So I just wanted to thank you for your hard work on this too, and bringing this together. And I'm looking forward to these monthly events because they're all just so timely and so important. And I know we're going to talk about trauma, and I was trying not to talk too much about trauma, but some of them are overlap. Some of them overlap a lot, so it's kind of hard not to.
Yeah. And there's all different kinds of abuse, and there's all different kinds of trauma. And so, with these monthly talks, I wanted to leave them kind of broad so that, you could kind of decide the direction to take with it. But yeah, next month we're going to have a talk on trauma and suicide. We have a panel at the moment. It looks like 4 people, I think. I'm thinking 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And so people will be able to ask them questions, and they're professionals in the field, and they've worked with a lot of clients and people that are dealing with trauma. So that's going to be next month. And yeah, it's very interesting, working with counseling clients and coaching clients, and just meeting different people who have told me, because I'm also, I've also recovered from suicidal thoughts, and, working on recovering from depression. And it's very interesting to me. People will have the same issue with suicidal thoughts or depression, but they're very different in the way that they've come to that, and the reason that they're struggling with it. And this topic is one of them. So, but yeah, I didn't feel like an expert in this topic, so I really appreciated you stepping in and being interested in doing this talk tonight. And some of you are asking about the resources. I would love to make them available on the website. And so we're working on revising the website right now. And the handouts and the app information is going to be on the resource guide that I have. So all of those resources that you saw in Lois's last 2 slides, those are going to be in there, even any that she mentioned throughout. So that one that was on the safety plan, that's also on there. And then there are a couple that some other people contributed from the coalition that are on that list as well, including trainings for professionals. So, so lots of information. I will make sure that I send it out to the 2 of you that requested that further information, and we'll try to get it up on the website. And yeah, email me if you do need any more resources or information on this topic. So,
and we have these hotlines up here as well. As you can see, domestic violence over here and the suicide prevention over here, and MHA and our coalition there as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess that is all for tonight. I will always be available by email if you guys want to talk any further, and also let me know if you want me to connect you to Lois. I know some of you are interested in that as well. So,
Sure.
so we can do that as well. So thank you guys so much for attending tonight, and I will see you next month.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.
See you later.
Wow. This was great, Lois. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.